My name is Samantha, I'm 29 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've always prided myself on being a careful, cautious person. I plan things out, I double-check the fine print, and I rarely, if ever, let my guard down. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal I was about to experience under my very own roof. You can go ahead to subscribe, like and share this story if you want to see how I discovered my roommate Melissa stealing and secretly selling my things online. And also, if you enjoy emotional storytelling, betrayal drama, and powerful revenge stories, don't miss this one. I moved into the apartment about a year ago. Rent in the city was sky high, and splitting it with a roommate seemed like the only logical option. After a few weeks of scrolling through ads and attending awkward roommate auditions, I found her, Melissa. Melissa seemed perfect at first. She was 27, worked in marketing, and had that easy, bubbly charm that made her instantly likable. She showed me around the apartment during our first meeting, talking a mile a minute about how she loved wine nights, movie marathons, and decorating the place with a cozy vibe. To be honest, she came across as the kind of roommate people dream of. She was neat, funny, and always willing to split chores fairly. The first few months went smoothly. We even grew close. I started thinking of her more as a friend than just someone I shared rent with. We'd sit on the couch in our pajamas, binging reality TV shows while eating Chinese takeout straight from the cartons. Some nights we'd stay up until 2 in the morning, talking about our dating disasters or laughing about our bosses. Felt lucky. After all the horror stories I'd heard about roommates, I thought I had hit the jackpot. But slowly little things started to feel off. First, it was small. A sweater I swore I had left in my closet went missing. I brushed it off, telling myself I must have misplaced it at my parents' house the last time I visited. A book I had been halfway through disappeared from my nightstand. Melissa said she hadn't seen it, so again, I assumed I was just being forgetful. But then, stranger things began to happen. One evening I came home from work and went straight to my room. Something felt different. My jewelry box, usually tucked neatly in the corner of my dresser, was sitting slightly ajar. I frowned, opened it, and my heart sank. A necklace my grandmother had given me was gone. I asked Melissa casually if she'd noticed anything weird around the apartment. She looked at me with wide eyes and shook her head. No, why? Did something happen? Just thought I misplaced something, I said quickly, not wanting to accuse her outright. She shrugged, then changed the subject to what we should order for dinner. I told myself I was overthinking things. Melissa was my friend, my roommate. She wouldn't do something like that, right? But a few days later, I was scrolling on my phone during my lunch break when something stopped me cold. I was browsing a local marketplace app, just killing time looking at secondhand furniture when I saw it. A very familiar necklace. My grandmother's necklace. Same chain, same unique pendant. The picture made my stomach twist. The seller's username wasn't Melissa's, but the location matched ours exactly. And the background of the photo, I'd recognize it anywhere. It was our apartment's kitchen counter. My hands shook as I stared at the listing. Melissa was selling my things online. I didn't say anything that night when I came home. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, smiling like everything was normal. I sat across from her, pretending to watch the TV, my mind racing. I wanted to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But instead I forced myself to stay calm. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that catching someone red-handed is powerful, but making them admit the truth themselves, that's devastating. And that was exactly what I planned to do. I wasn't just going to confront Melissa. I was going to bait her into confessing. I told myself to breathe and to think like I was at work. Methodical, unemotional, procedural. Screaming and slamming things around in the living room would have felt good for 2 minutes, and then left me vulnerable to charm and manipulation. If Melissa realized I knew, she could hide the evidence or switch the listings to another account. I needed certainty, and I needed a confession that was hers and hers alone. That evening I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table where she'd taken the selling photos. I opened the marketplace listing again and zoomed in on every little detail of the picture, The chipped mug in the corner, the exact angle of the backsplash, the faint scuff mark on the counter. It all matched our place. I copied the listing URL and sent it to myself in an email so I wouldn't risk it disappearing if she pulled it down. Then I did something small and deliberately risky. I saved a screenshot to my phone and hid it in a private album. When she came into the kitchen humming, I greeted her with my most normal voice. "Hey Mel. Long day." She grinned, the familiar easy smile that had charmed me into trust. Long. You want leftovers or should I order?" "Leftovers sound great," I said. "I'll heat something up." She slouched onto the stool opposite me, phone already in hand. I watched the way she scrolled. Not so fast that she was trying to hide anything, not slow enough to look suspicious. She seemed blasé, almost proud. That made bile rise in my throat. I decided to start small. "By the way," I said casually, "have you ever sold anything online? Like on that marketplace app?" She looked up like I'd asked if she ever ate cereal. "Yeah, sometimes. Old clothes, textbooks. You know, stuff takes up space." "Oh, cool." Kept my voice easy. "Do you make much doing that?" I shrugged. "A little extra beer money." "Why?" "Just curious," I said. "Might try it someday. Get rid of a few things I don't use." She nodded and went back to scrolling. I felt like a cat circling an unfamiliar mousehole, careful not to reveal the pounce until it would be irresistible. That night I made a plan. Over the next few days I would act oblivious while I built an indisputable trail of proof. I started by tracking other listings on the marketplace app that matched other missing items. An embroidered sweater of mine, a vintage book, a pair of boots. It was almost mechanical. Scroll, spot, zoom, screenshot, save to private album. Each time I found something, I catalogued it in a note on my laptop with item description, timestamp, and the listing URL. My fingers felt steady when I typed. Doing the work made the treachery feel smaller, manageable, like a problem with a solution. I also set up an alternate account on the app. Brand new, anonymous, so I could watch the listings without alerting whoever had posted them that a known buyer was looking. I searched the seller's profile and discovered something else. Multiple listings with the same background. It was like opening a closet and finding the same brand of hanger on every rail. Whoever had taken my things had used the same little staging techniques. Same mug, same scuff, same off-center angle. It was proof that this wasn't a stranger or a fluke. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my friends. Part of me wanted someone to say, "Call the cops." But I knew theft under a roommate roof was messy and police reports sometimes just made air and paperwork. I wanted a confession. I wanted Melissa to collapse under the weight of her own words. For days I kept the house behaving like a normal household. We had shared dinners, Netflix nights, roommate banter. I laughed at her jokes. I even complimented her outfit one afternoon. Something I used to do without thinking. She seemed buoyant, free of guilt or if she felt it, very practiced at not showing it. But my nights were occupied. I'd creep out of bed once she was asleep, pull up my hidden album and cross-reference photos. I printed a few of the most damning images and placed them in a folder labeled in my computer as miscellaneous receipts. Felt petty but again, method. If she asked, I'd pretend the folder was for something else. The last thing I wanted was to give her an excuse to move things or get rid of the goods. One afternoon a package arrived. A small box with a return address I didn't recognize. I almost tossed it on the counter, but something inside me was alert. The box was light. I opened it in the privacy of my room. Inside was a small pendant I had thought lost months ago. The silver piece my college roommate had given me as a joke graduation gift. I had been certain it was gone forever. I stared at the pendant, then at the address on the shipping label. The return address was a forwarding service located 2 neighborhoods away, a place used by sellers who didn't want to use their real home address. It was the breadcrumb I'd needed. If Melissa had been careful, she wouldn't have used such a traceable forwarding service. But people make sloppy choices when they have to move things fast or when they get greedy. The thread of evidence tightened. I called in sick one Friday, claiming a sudden migraine, something benign and believable. I needed a day to collect myself and to set a small trap. My plan was not only to prove she'd sold my things but to provoke her into saying something incriminating in person. I wanted it to be her words, not just screenshots, that nailed her. When Melissa left for work that morning, she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Feel better, Sam. Don't work too hard." That easy warmth was like salt in a wound. I waved her off, then booted up my laptop. First, I messaged the anonymous account I'd created and inquired about one of the listings for my sweater. "Hey, is this still available?" The reply came within minutes. "Yes. Meet at the alley near the bookstore at 5. The casual, cryptic tone told me this seller had done this before. They weren't trying to hide under the bright light of the app. They trusted the system. I told them I'd pick it up. I printed a receipt slip from the app, my purchase, and left it casually on the kitchen table, a prop visible to anyone who walked in. I wanted Melissa to notice it and think I was selling things, which might make her less guarded, or it might make her proud. Either way, I wanted her to underestimate what I knew. I texted a mutual friend, Priya, and asked if she could run me to the bookstore alley later in the evening. I didn't tell her what for, just that I had someone who needed help picking something up. Priya agreed, intrigued by the mystery. At 4:45 p.m., Melissa came home early, humming a tune. She looked tired but put together. She dropped her bag, flopped on the couch, and asked me if I'd heard about a marketing gig she was considering. I listened, asked questions, all the while watching her fingers, her micro-expressions. When she noticed the printed receipt on the table, her eyes froze for a fraction of a second. She didn't touch it, but the glance was a little too quick. "Picking up something?" she asked lightly, casual like a ping. "Yeah," I said, barely looking up. "A friend's helping me." The answer was bland, neutral. Exactly what I wanted her to hear. At 6:15, I texted the anonymous seller from my second phone, the one Priya knew about, confirming our meetup. Then, Priya and I drove to the alley behind the bookstore, keeping a discreet distance from the meeting point. It felt ridiculous and vindicating at the same time. Two women in pajamas pretending to buy a sweater no one actually needed. The seller arrived on a bike, hood up, the sweater wrapped in a grocery bag. When the exchange happened, I watched from the shadows, heart pounding, while Priya pretended to be a friendly helper. The seller handed over the bag, collected cash, and rode off. Priya walked away with the sweater wrapped in her coat as if it were a warm, urgent charity. We came back to the apartment a half hour later. Melissa was on the couch, phone in hand when we walked in. She looked up in that lazy way that said she'd been checking Twitter for the last hour. Priya tossed the bag toward me with a stupid grin and said, "Sam, I got you a bargain." I unwrapped the sweater casually in front of Melissa and held it up like I'd found it in a thrift store. Her reaction was tiny but telling. Her eyes darted to the tag inside the collar. She took a breath like she was deciding on a lie. "That's a nice find," she said, voice a hair too even. "You should list stuff too. People make bank." I let it hang there, and she took the bait in a way I hadn't fully expected. "Actually," she blurted, perhaps trying to be helpful, perhaps needing to remind me of her ingenuity, "I've been thinking of selling some stuff, decluttering. I mean, some things I found around here, old mugs, books, that kind of stuff. Everyone's doing it." Her words were casual, but they were an admission in front of a witness. Priya smiled, oblivious, and commented that selling stuff could pay for a weekend trip. Melissa launched into a little monologue about easy extra cash. It was exactly the tone of someone advertising an entrepreneurial hobby, the kind of voice someone slips into when they want to sound industrious rather than criminal. I sat back and let it wash over me. The evidence had stacked up. The listings, the pendant sent from a forwarding address, the seller's signature staging, her micro-reactions. Now Melissa had said it out loud in company. But I wasn't finished. I needed a confession that placed her selling my things beyond doubt. The casual admission that she sold stuff was delicious but not the smoking gun. That night I crafted another move. I composed a text to her phone, typed slowly so she could see the words pop up if she happened to glance at her screen. "Thinking of selling a few of my old things, maybe the necklace and the vintage book? Will you help me list them? I'll give you first dibs on handling it. It was bait in the most literal sense. An invitation for complicity. I slid the phone over the counter so she could read it. She did. Her face went white. The chit-chat died in her throat. Sam, she said too quickly. I don't. She stumbled and Priya, nursing a soda nearby, watched the whole thing like it was a sitcom. She asked a flippant question about logistics and then excused herself back to her life, leaving the two of us alone. When the apartment door clicked shut, Melissa stared at the screen as if the words were a live wire. I can help list them for you, she said at last, voice brittle. Her admission was not dramatic or full of remorse, just a plain offering. And I trust you? I asked, my voice soft and flat. You're okay selling things that don't belong to you. She began to stammer diet excuses. Money is tight, it's the economy, she needed to help her mom. That old litany of reasons people cobble together when they're suddenly caught. But she also said something unexpected. I didn't think you'd notice. We use different usernames. I let her say it all. I let her confess. I let her offer to return things in some vague, future tense way that sounded like patchwork. It was intoxicating to watch her fumble in the thin light of our kitchen, the weight of her words anchoring the moment. When she finally finished, I felt hollow and oddly relieved. It wasn't the melodramatic scene I'd once imagined. No shouting, no dramatic slamming doors, but it was cleaner, truer. She had spoken the thing I'd been carrying like a stone in my throat. Took a breath. Okay, I said, even-keeled. I guess we have things to sort out. She looked at me like she expected me to be furious enough to call the police or to make a scene. Instead, I felt a calm so sharp it almost hurt. We will sort this, I said. But first you need to give me everything you sold. The pendant, the sweater, the book. And you need to tell me where you sent things and what accounts you used. We'll decide the rest after that. She hesitated, then nodded. Her posture shrank in on itself. Okay. I'd wanted a confession on my terms, words said by her in the light of day. I'd wanted evidence and accountability. I'd gotten both. But the next step was crucial. I would need to document this conversation without appearing coercive. I would need to build a record, not just of the stolen goods, but of her admissions. And then I would have to decide what justice looked like, whether calling the police, demanding restitution, or simply evicting her and reclaiming my life would be the right path. I told myself I'd wait and be strategic. The confession was the turning point. Now the real work began. After Melissa's casual "oops, my bad" confession, I smiled, but inside my blood boiled. She didn't sound guilty. She didn't sound scared. She sounded like someone who had been caught jaywalking, not someone who had stolen from her own roommate. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, I realized something. If I confronted Melissa directly, she'd just spin the narrative. She was manipulative, good at playing the victim. If I wanted justice, I had to be smarter. I had to set her up in a way that she couldn't twist the truth. The next morning I got up earlier than usual, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat down with my laptop. I created a brand new email and a fake Facebook profile with a name I thought Melissa wouldn't recognize. Then I used that account to message her on the platform where I'd seen my watch for sale. Hi, is this item still available? I typed, pretending to be interested in my own stolen watch. Within an hour, Melissa replied. Yep, still available. Barely used. Price is negotiable if you can pick it up fast. I stared at the screen, anger and satisfaction mixing in my chest. There was proof. Proof that my roommate wasn't just selling random junk from the apartment, but my things specifically. I could have gone to the police right then, but no. Not yet. I wanted her to dig her own grave a little deeper. So I baited her further. I'm also interested in some of your other listings. Are they still available too? Melissa. Yes, most of them are. Just let me know what you're looking at. I clicked through her page. My stomach sank and twisted as I recognized more of my stuff. A leather handbag my aunt had gifted me, one of my old cameras, even a set of kitchen knives I had bought last year. She was selling everything piece by piece, as if my belongings were her personal thrift store. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just get mad. I had to outsmart her. That day, I went to a local electronics store and bought a cheap little nanny cam. It looked like a USB charger, something you could easily plug into the wall without raising suspicion. When I got home, I plugged it into the outlet near the living room, where Melissa often staged her photos for online listings. Over the next week, I pretended everything was normal. I chatted with her about work, about bills, about random nonsense. I even laughed at her stupid jokes. Meanwhile, the little hidden camera quietly recorded her every move. And sure enough, it caught her red-handed. On Tuesday evening, I came home to find her in the living room, carefully arranging one of my designer jackets on a hanger, snapping pictures with her phone. My jacket, a gift from my mom on my 25th birthday. She didn't even flinch as she handled it like it was hers to sell. When I checked the footage later, I nearly cried from frustration and rage. But I also felt relief. 'Cause now I had evidence. Undeniable evidence. Still, I wasn't satisfied. Evidence was good, but humiliation was better. And I wanted Melissa to feel every ounce of shame that she had tried to dump on me. That night I called my best friend, Jenna, and told her everything. "You've got to be kidding me," Jenna said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "She's actually selling your things. Online." "Yep," I said bitterly. "And she confessed to it like it was nothing." "I'm done, Jenna. I'm going to set her up." There was a pause. Then Jenna said, "What's the plan?" I hesitated. I wanted to make sure I didn't just expose Melissa. I wanted her to trip over her own lies so thoroughly that she couldn't escape. "I'm going to bait her into admitting everything," I said finally. "And I'll do it in a way where she can't backtrack." Jenna laughed darkly. "God, I wish I could be there to see it." "Oh, trust me," I told her. "You'll get front row seats." I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, heart pounding with adrenaline. The pieces were starting to come together. Melissa had no idea, but she was walking straight into the trap I was setting for her. And I wasn't going to stop until she was fully exposed. I could feel the trap snap into place and still my hands trembled. Not with fear but with the electric charge that comes before something important happens. I had all the evidence I needed. Screenshots of listings, the pendant with the forwarding label, the nanny cam footage of her staging photos. I had her own words admitting she sold stuff. What I didn't have yet was the moment where she would truly understand that her little hustle had turned into exposure and consequence. My plan was simple, surgical, and public enough to be undeniable. I wanted witnesses. I wanted context. I wanted her to feel the social gravity of being caught in a lie that hurt someone she lived with and, in theory, loved as a roommate friend. I didn't want her to be able to gaslight me into silence or cry her way out of responsibility. The trap had to be airtight. First, I called our landlord's office and scheduled a routine walk-through inspection for the upcoming Saturday, one they always did at lease renewal time. I didn't mention why I wanted it scheduled. I gave some neutral excuse about making sure the smoke detectors were working. The landlord scheduled it for 10 a.m. and said he'd bring a maintenance person. Perfect. Public, official, and inconvenient for anyone who wanted to hide something. Then I emailed the Marketplace Apps Abuse team from an anonymous account, attaching screenshots and saying simply, "I think this account is listing stolen items from a residence in your city. I'd appreciate it if you could investigate." I wasn't trying to get her banned immediately. I wanted the platform to have my evidence on file in case she tried to remove things. Documentation everywhere. Next, I invited a couple of friends over that Saturday morning under the pretense of a last coffee before Melissa's trip. I said trip because she'd been talking about visiting her mom. She'd be expecting me to be away later in the day. Jenna agreed to come by early with her camera phone and a calm demeanor. Priya texted that she'd stop by as well. I wanted people who could corroborate what happened if it came down to he said she said. The evening before the inspection, I cooked a ridiculous dinner. Comfort food, the kind that makes people linger at the table and run their mouths. Melissa ate like a queen, bragging a little about the easy extra cash she'd been making. She bragged in that way people do when they anticipate no consequences. I laughed at the right beats, asked the right mundane questions, and kept my face a blank mask of normalcy. At 9:30 a.m. the next morning, Jenna and Priya arrived. We brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and acted like it was any other Saturday. At 9:45 the landlord, Mr. Ortega, a bulky no-nonsense man who loved his checklist, arrived with the maintenance guy. He greeted Melissa and me, made small talk, and began the inspection, clipboard in hand. At 10:05, while Mr. Ortega was checking the smoke detector and making obliging notes, I excused myself to grab some cleaning supplies from my bedroom. In reality, I slipped past the living room and went to the kitchen counter where Melissa staged her listing photos. Heart pounding, I turned toward the wall socket where the nanny cam was plugged in. I flipped it off for a second, then back on. An intentional move to make sure the camera's last recorded file would timestamp right around that inspection time. I wanted an unbroken chain. Staged item, staged photo, the inspection, and the moment a landlord might see the proofs. When I returned to the living room, Melissa was mid-sentence with Mr. Ortega, asking about repainting the hallway. The landlord was distracted enough to not notice my small maneuver. I sat down, hands folded, like the quiet roommate who just happened to care about the smoke alarm batteries. After he left, satisfied, clipboard complete, we moved to the living room, coffee in hand, and the mood suddenly settled into a softer domestic hum. It was the perfect scene. Witnesses, casual chatter, a man from the building who could attest to the state of the apartment. The trap felt stepwise perfect. I decided it was time to confront her, but not in private. I wanted a confession that wasn't shaped by the soft manipulations she loved to use when alone. I also wanted the confession documented. "Mel," I said softly, looking at her directly, "can we talk for a minute?" Her eyebrows shot up. "Sure, what's up?" I kept my voice calm and even. "You said the other night you'd been selling some stuff to make extra cash. I found a few items that belonged to me listed on the marketplace." Melissa blinked, then gave this weird little smile I'd learned to recognize as the prelude to a story. "What? No, listen, I was just helping you clear out. I thought you wanted to declutter." Cut her off. "You told me you'd help list things if I wanted. But you never asked." Her face hardened. She'd moved from surprise to the practiced posture of denial. "I didn't take anything that wasn't fair game, Samantha. I only sold things I thought were old or abandoned. You know how you leave things everywhere sometimes." That was the classic pivot. Deny culpability, cast doubt on the victim. It was manipulative and, in another life, barely convincing. But here's the thing, I had proof. I tapped a button on my phone and played the nanny cam footage right there on the coffee table screen. The little video showed Melissa arranging my grandmother's necklace, taking careful photos, wrapping the pendant in tissue paper. It showed her sitting on the floor, holding the camera at just the right angle so the kitchen counter was in the background, the same distinctive background from the listing photos. The quality wasn't cinematic, but the evidence was clear. Priya's mouth fell open. Jenna's expression hardened with righteous fury. Mr. Ortega, still in the apartment retrieving a forgotten screwdriver, froze, then looked sharply at Melissa. "You see that?" asked, my voice steady. "This is the pendant that belonged to my grandmother. You sold it without asking me. You shipped it using a forwarding address." Melissa's breath snagged. For the first time she looked like a woman trying to remember the right script. A very human moment watching someone improvise under pressure. She stammered something about being desperate, about small debts, about how she thought I wouldn't notice. Her voice was thin and quick and utterly unconvincing. "Give it back," I said very quietly. I wasn't asking. I was issuing a command anchored in the moral clarity of being wronged in my own home. Melissa sniffed, searched my eyes for softness, as if appealing to pity could rescue her. "Sam, I can give you the money, just let me pay you back." I didn't mean for it to go this far. "It's not just about money," I said. "It's about trust. It's about the fact that you went through my things and sold them while I slept in the next room. It's about living with someone who thinks your things are disposable." She looked suddenly small, the bravado crumbling. Maybe that's what I wanted for a moment, just to see her human and accountable. But the betrayal had been too big to make up with tears. Mr. Ortega, who had been listening with a frown, finally spoke up. If you've been selling someone else's property without permission, that's theft. That's a police matter. Melissa's eyes went wide as saucers. She spoke a stream of babble, fears, promises, and a plea for calm. Jenna took a slow breath, looked at me, and nudged her phone camera awake. She'd been recording much of this, silent and steady. I wanted to build a record beyond the nanny cam. Witnesses, landlord testimony, recorded confession, and the online listings already archived. The next 2 hours were a blur of decisions. I called my mother, then reasoned that calling the police would escalate in a way I might regret. We wanted accountability, yes, but I also wanted Melissa gone from the apartment without this becoming a full-blown criminal spectacle that might drag everyone, my friend circle and the building, into an ugly vortex. In the end, Mr. Ortega suggested mediation first, a tenant hearing to decide whether Melissa would be evicted for violating lease terms. It was a compromise between formal legal action and private revenge. During the hearing, I presented the evidence: screenshots, the nanny cam footage, the forwarding address on the pendant, and the recorded exchange where she admitted to selling things. The landlord, a pragmatic man who ran this building by rules and paperwork more than by passion, concluded quickly. Tenants had obligations. Selling another occupant's property was a clear breach. He gave Melissa 2 options: return and make full restitution within a week or face eviction proceedings. Melissa chose to stay and promise repayment. Felt like a tentative victory. But the real victory was the confession. She had said the words in front of witnesses. She had admitted the theft verbally, and she had been caught in the act on camera. There was no plausible deniability left. In the days that followed, Melissa complied. Mostly. She returned a few smaller items and wired me some money for the pendant's replacement value, though she avoided mentioning where she'd sold things and to whom. I pressed for the account names and the forwarding address, but she kept those details close, like a gambler hiding her cards. She returned what she could, but not everything. Some things were gone for good, shipped to buyers who could not be tracked or who refused to return goods. I felt victorious in small gulps and frustrated in larger ones. The pendant's sentimental value was not exactly recreatable with cash. Some of my things had been sentimental in ways money couldn't stitch together. But Melissa's removal of that skeleton of trust meant I could breathe in my home again. She had been held accountable by the people who'd witnessed her acts. The scariest part, in a quiet way, was realizing how many small harms people commit and how easily they are normalized until someone makes them stop. Little thefts, small betrayals, they compound. The landlord's intervention forced a structural response. He had the authority to punish the leaseholder. The neighbors saw the reality of theft in their own hallway. And the world felt a little more safe because I'd taken the time to piece together a record rather than explode and let the moment slip away. Even so, it was messy. Melissa tried to repair in her way. Groveling texts, awkward offers of repayment, a few staged attempts at apologies, but her words felt thin against the ridge of consequences. I felt the truth like a slow burn. People are complex. People can be cruel and also frightened and regretful. But some acts require a consequence, a mirror held up until a person sees themselves honestly. Jenna and Priya stayed close in the days after, cooking meals and offering to help with what needed to be filed. My mother offered to replace the sentimental pieces I'd lost, though she couldn't replace the memories they carried. I accepted a few replacements for the things that mattered most and declined others, learning which losses could be filled and which could not. In the following weeks, our apartment felt different. Melissa still lived there for a while, but there was an invisible tension, a quiet geography to the rooms that hadn't existed before. We moved our routines to minimize contact. I set clearer boundaries about personal space. She'd clean a sink with exaggerated vigor as if performance could erase guilt. People in the building gave me sympathetic nods when we passed in the hallway. It felt oddly vindicating and oddly lonely at once. As for Melissa, she did end up leaving a month after the incident. The strain, the shame, and the logistics of repairing trust proved heavier than she could bear. She packed her things in a small, quiet afternoon, her eyes avoiding mine as though she wore a mask of regret. She left behind a note promising to repay what she could and asking for forgiveness. I kept the note in a drawer for a day, then burned it. Not out of vengeance, only to mark closure. I wanted a clean slate. After she left, I shredded the nanny cam footage except for a copy I sent to the marketplace's abuse team, to the landlord, and to myself. The recordings served their purpose. Evidence that sealed a breach and allowed the building to act. I didn't want the footage to become a weapon for humiliation. I wanted it to be a means of accountability. The weeks that came after were about repair, reclaiming the living room, rehoming the items that had returned, resetting my routines to include locks on closet doors where sentimental items now lived. I instituted a small household ledger and insisted on any larger sales involving our space be shared and documented. It felt bureaucratic and oddly empowering. Protection through paperwork. Friends told me I'd been brave. Some told me I'd been cold and calculating. The truth was I'd been myself, decided, methodical, finally not a passive participant in my life. The vulnerability of being violated had been replaced by a hard-earned steadiness. Looking back, I realized the revenge I'd wanted was never about making her suffer. It was about removing the power she'd taken from me by stealing trust, by turning my home into a marketplace for her quick cash. I wanted my home back. I wanted to sleep without the nagging knowledge that my things might be photographed and sold behind my back. The rest was consequence. Months later, when I walked through the apartment, I noticed the small, quiet ways I had changed. I locked the jewelry box and kept a digital inventory of important items. I was less trusting but not colder. I had learned to protect my things and my peace. And when someone new moved into the building, I found myself telling them, not as a boast but as advice. Document, communicate, and trust your instincts. Most people are decent, I told them, but some are not. And being careful doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you practical. If anything, the experience sharpened my sense of boundaries. I realized that living with someone gives them access to your life in ways you can't foresee. It requires a kind of mutual respect that not everyone understands. When the balance tilts, you have to find ways to restore it. And that was what I did. I restored the balance. I took back my things, my space, and, most importantly, my right to be secure in my own home.